Good morning, everyone. It is 11 o'clock. It is going to be the start of the next session, which is on introduction to the internet governance ecosystem. To do a fair play on this one, we have got three speakers from three different organizations which are very critical for internet. One of them being ICANN. So I'll invite Mr. Samiran Gupta from ICANN to come onto the stage. The next one is Nicole. Nicole is from Internet Society. She is now distributing the goodies. So if you have not got one, you can get in touch with her again. So Nicole heads the public policy and external engagement with Internet Society. Thank you, Nicole, for joining the session. Joining us online. Joining us online, we have Pablo from representing APNIC. He is right now waving to us. So can we say a loud hello to Pablo? Hello. Good. Thank you. So internet governance has got key organizations which play a very, very important role. And one of them being ICANN, and we have Samiran here. So I'll start with Samiran today. You have the mic, Samiran, there. From the morning, we have heard that multi-stakeholderism is a very important piece in internet governance. Okay. So what I am going to ask you is that what was the need of multi-stakeholderism and why was ICANN created and how did multi-stakeholderism benefited ICANN? Had it been a normal multilateral thing, would ICANN be a different organization or how it would have been? So three questions jumbled together.
So many questions, so little time, but very happy to be here. Thank you. Anything else?
No, we can take it from there.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for having me here today. Even before I get to ICANN, I'm going to do a quick pop quiz and ask for a show of hands. Who in this room was around in 1969? There you go. Who was around in 1972? All right, cool. So these dates are actually, and I'm taking a couple of minutes to talk about a bit of the history of the internet. So 1969 is when the DARPA project started in the US, and there were a lot of young engineers who were working on it. And one of them was Steve Postel, and he, there wasn't a grand plan, but he ended up being the guy who was keeping track of these numbers. In those days, there was no names in this quest for sending, a packet of information from one point to another. So what was the project about? They were trying to figure out how can you send in a most efficient manner a packet of information from one node to another. So it can be one computer to another. And it's a fairly straightforward query, and they were working on it. And, over time, the standards were being tested, discarded, tested, discarded. And eventually in 1972, they figured out that, okay, we have something to work with, and the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, IANA, was created. And of course, John was the one-man show of that IANA, and he was issuing IP addresses and protocol parameter numbers and anything to do with the numbers part. This went on. By 1983, now quickly fast forward, many of you were on this planet. By 1983, TCP/IP got standardized, and the DARPA project adopted TCP/IP. And then what happened was a looking forward, they realized, or particularly John Postel realized at some point that, I can't continue doing this, just issuing numbers. I can, there could be some errors. There needs to be an institutional framework. And eventually, of course, John passed away soon thereafter. But in 1998, 30th September 1998, to be precise, ICANN was formed. Okay. And why was ICANN formed? Because people realized that there's more to just numbers, just about issuing numbers. It's about how you manage them, what are the policies about numbers, so on and so forth. And once ICANN was formed, in the next year or so, certain constituencies were given birth to. And you can read all of this in a very nice publication that Internet Society put out in 2017, which talks about the IANA. And then, of course, IANA, while the IANA functions continue to exist, but that structure, the management structure, moved to a new structure called Public Technical Identifiers, PTI. Anupam here is actually a board member of PTI. So that happened in 2016. IANA kind of existed for 44 years as an organization, but the IANA functions continue, run by PTI. Now, I have digressed a little bit, but I thought this was important before we start talking about ICANN, because ICANN's role is about names, numbers, and protocol parameters. We work with Pablo's outfit, for example. He's awake. I just wanted to make sure he's awake. So, thank you, Pablo. In issuing numbers, we coordinate with the regional internet registries. There are 5 of those, but let me stop here. Your specific question was, what is this multi-stakeholder model?
And why is it important for ICANN to follow multi-stakeholder?
Okay. So this came out, now, one can debate where did this come from? But John Postel, one of his ideas, when he was issuing these numbers, one of his ideas was, once we get into this whole policy part of this conversation, it needs to have the participation of those who are using the internet, okay? Those who will be creating online and so on and so forth. And therefore, this concept of a multi-stakeholder model started taking root. There was a debate that happened and in parallel, running in parallel was the WSIS process, 2003 and 2005. There are probably other sessions, so I won't encroach on those sessions and talk about WSIS over here now. But that was the more multilateral process where the United Nations, through the ITU, was trying to figure out what to do with this new technology. And in 2005, they came out with a broad understanding that this, managing this technology or governing this technology, there needs to be a process in which both governments and civil society, academia, technical community needs to be a part of. So that's how it all. I'm making it sound very easy and very simple, and there were no challenges, but that's not the story. Obviously, there were a fair bit of challenges that came along the way, and it's an internet governance, and I'm going to end here briefly.
Okay.
Internet governance is an existential challenge. There are new challenges that come along from time to time. They could be led by policy, or they could be led by technology. So I'll leave that for now, but I think I should have answered.
So, Samiran, just for the clarity of everyone, can we say that multi-stakeholderism was at the root of the formation of ICANN?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Indeed.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll move to online. I'll come to you a little later. So Pablo, thank you for being awake. And when ICANN could not do anything, they just sent their one of their main as DG Epinic. Okay, so you you are now going to represent Epinic, present Epinic in front of all the fellows here. Can you give a brief background that what was the origin of APNIC, what is your mandate, and how currently are you fulfilling this mandate? What are you doing to fulfill your mandate?
Thank you so much. It is so good to be here. I hope you are listening to me well. I'm Pablo. I'm the Senior Director for Engagement here at APNIC. I am calling from Brisbane in Australia, where the headquarters of APNIC are. Indeed, as you mentioned, Anupam, today is the first day of our new Director General, Jarong Low, and he's here in the office, so we have been a bit busy with briefings, etc., etc. A lot of internet organizations are refreshing its leadership. It's a good opportunity as well to refresh our collaborations. I'm sorry I'm not there, but I hope I can see you in the near future. I think in answer to your question, I would like to start with first the fact that the governance of the internet and the internet itself is always layered. And always a decision in one layer may affect other layers as well, but it's very important that we know where the effect of those policy decisions are. So we have the layer of infrastructure, which we call it the physical layer, and it's where all the cables, fiber, antennas, microwave, satellites are. This is the physical infrastructure of the network, submarine cables, IXPs, hardware. This is the physical layer. Most of what I'm going to talk about and where APNIC works is in this middle layer where the standards reside. So this is where the addressing system works. So we take care of the IP addressing system, the numbers that each device uses to connect among themselves. And most of what we understand are the current challenges of the internet is in the upper content and application layer. That's the thing that goes into the news or where we get the news from. And it's sometimes where most of the behaviors and the challenges and the cybersecurity issues are happening. But I'm going to talk about the middle layer, which is the logical layer. Sometimes the users take for granted the system of unique identifiers. And as I've said, the internet is a network of networks, and they use a system of identifiers to be able to interconnect a device in one network with a device in another network. And they use this system of numbers, the IP addressing system. So this is also layered because the IP addresses, which are numbers, can also translate into easier to remember and more friendly names, and that's the domain name system. So the domain name system is the thing that ICANN coordinates at the global level, and it's a hierarchy, starting with the root and then with generic top-level domains such as .com and .org, and country code domain names such as AU, JP, and others. So this is a system of a lot of registries and registrars, hundreds of organizations that need to be coordinated in order to resolve names into numbers and resolve them right into the places that they should. So it's not a trivial issue for this system to work well. And for many, many, many years, this coordination of unique identifiers was the main internet governance problem. So for many years, internet governance was mostly focused on how we are going to coordinate these domain names and IP addresses. But today we recognize that internet governance has transcended that problem and has become more oriented into cybersecurity and privacy and internet fragmentation and things that happen in the upper layer of content and applications. So this is a timeline of the organizations. It corresponds more or less as what Samiran was saying. So the first efforts to create organizations in order to coordinate all these things started in the 1980s. And the first institution was that institution that develops the standards in which devices communicate with each other. That's the IETF. India has a very dynamic and vibrant community that participates in the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. Early 90s, the first registries for IP addresses started to emerge. This was a function that was performed by one man, and then he delegated these to specific areas and organizations and people that could work these in different regions of the world. Such was the case of RIPE NCC. At the time, they were dealing with Europe, Central Asia, and also Africa. APNIC was formed in 1993. It's the best regional internet registry, of course, and it's the one serving India, the Asia Pacific Network Information Center. The other registries are also good, but not as good as APNIC, of course. ARIN in North America and the Caribbean. And it was later on, in 1998, when ICANN was created as an umbrella to coordinate both the names and the numbers. Afterwards, two new registries were created, one in Latin America for LACNIC and the other in Africa called AFRINIC. An assistant to coordinate the 5 registries for numbers was created also in the early 2000s. So, as I've said, this is all an ecosystem. It's independent organizations and different communities of stakeholders that together maintain global, open, stable, and secure internet, mostly in that logical layer, which was the fundamental layer for internet governance. And this was all sort of very idealistic at the beginning. I'm going to show a quick video of one of the advisors in the US government that helped to trigger the creation of these institutions such as ICANN. His name is Ira Magaziner.
Okay, so the internet was still very small, but we felt that there needed to be some market-driven, quickly moving vehicle that could embody the marketplace and the multi-stakeholders in the internet, but be recognized by governments so that legally they could withstand legal challenges to what they were doing. And after a comment process and so on, a year and a half, ICANN was born from that process. And it was a first of its kind organization in the world, where you had a private nonprofit organization recognized by governments, with governments playing an advisory role. Now, we did that because we felt that even though we were supporters of the United Nations overall, that the internet needed to be market-driven, it needed to be bottoms-up, it needed to be democratic, and it needed to move quickly.
So that was some of the ideals that generated these new organizations such as ICANN and before that, APNIC, RIPE, ARIN. And this didn't become mainstream, but until this World Summit on the Information Society that Samiran was talking about, and this was Summit of the United Nations. It was held in 2 phases, first in Geneva, second in Tunis in 2005. And it was that summit that generated the Internet Governance Forum, which has been in existence for almost 20 years since then, continuing to discuss Internet governance issues. So it was a very important process because it brought the whole world governments and other stakeholders into the notion of the importance of internet connectivity, and also how important it is to keep a good, well-running, efficient governance system. So there were different challenges into all of these, because at the time, and Samiran mentioned a little bit of this, there was a very exclusive role of the US government overseeing ICANN at the time. So there was almost a 15, 16 years process where slowly the role of the US government was reduced and delegated into the community in order for ICANN to become independent, international, universal, etc. And that provided a lot of certainty to other players in the ecosystem, such as APNIC as well. I'm going to show a quick video that provides this history by Vint Cerf. He doesn't need much introduction. He's one of the fathers of the internet. At that time, 69, when Samiran was talking, and almost nobody in the room were part of that, since we are a bit younger.
The project began with support from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in 1973, and in fact, preceding that was the ARPANET project starting in 1968. But as time went on, responsibility for this system devolved from DARPA to the Defense Communications Agency, which is now called DISA, and then to the National Science Foundation, and then ultimately to the Department of Commerce. And in those transitions, the United States government reduced its position, its authority, its decision-making activity with regard to internet. This was a continuous, essentially relegation or delegation of responsibility away from the government.
So relegation away from the government. And this means that it was fully privatized, and this happened in 2016. So what happened? So let's say that the Department of Commerce of the US actually held an oversight mission of IANA, which were the essential functions for names, numbers, and protocols. And this was kind of the accountability way, oversight of the Department of Commerce to IANA, performed by ICANN to the community. However, the IANA stewardship transition process was very interesting, because ultimately what happened was to revert these arrows into ICANN, IANA, and the whole set of IANA functions out from the Department of Commerce, and being the community at the top, the one that held accountable all these systems, organizations, and governance processes. So it's a fascinating and unprecedented milestone, and it doesn't happen very often that the communities, the stakeholders, have that level of responsibility on one hand, but also that they are the ones that held accountable all these organizations. And I'm talking about this because the internet today is about billions and billions of devices interconnected. While there are almost 8 billion people in the planet, more than half of them are connected, mostly by smartphones. And all of these requires a lot of cooperation between different players. And there is no way that all of these system of governance can be legitimate and can progress without an active community that participates and is very committed to support sort of these processes and these organizations. I'll leave it there. I hope that provided some context of how these organizations, particularly APNIC and the RIRs and the numbers, relate with the names, relate with ICANN, relate with the internet governance ecosystem.
Thank you, Pablo, for giving this history. So, friends, if you have not noted, please note that APNIC was formed earlier than ICANN. While ICANN is the overall body managing it, but APNIC was formed much earlier than ICANN itself. And that's an important point to note. So I will now move to Noel, sorry. So Noel, Internet Society, I think, was formed in 1991 or somewhere around 1992. So can you give us a brief history of why there was a need for Internet Society? What drove the formation of the Internet Society?
All right. Hi. Thank you for having me here, by the way. So the Internet Society was, what is it now? What, 30, a 32-year-old organization. Um, we were founded by one of the guys who you saw earlier in Pablo's. Thank you, by the way, Pablo. Excellent presentation, and you made my job a lot easier. One of the guys who you saw on the latter video, Vint Cerf, who's now with Google. So he and Bob Kahn led the team that developed the TCP/IP. So the TCP/IP is basically the language that our devices and networks on the internet use to talk to each other. So if you notice, it doesn't matter what kind of device you have, what kind of network you're on. If your machine speaks that language, it can connect to the internet and it can talk to other people and other machines who are on the internet. So that's very fundamental to the design of the internet, so to speak. So Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn, they also set up the Internet Society because of a conviction that a lot of people in this room and a lot of people who are involved in internet governance still believe. And that is, this is a global resource. It's a global public resource that should be beneficial to everyone. And that remains at the core of the Internet Society's mission. So the Internet Society, up until this day, works to uphold and preserve a globally connected, open, trustworthy, and secure internet. So that's a rather broad mission. But ultimately, what we want is for the internet to be a force for good in society. So I hope that answers. I'm happy to answer more questions.
Fantastic. So, Internet Society does have chapters as well, all right? And this program currently is being organized by 7 chapters in India. So, did you find any experiment like this happening anywhere else in the world?
Yes. So before I answer that, I should also maybe talk a little bit about what the internet, how the Internet Society is composed, so to speak. So we are a global charity. That's how we operate, and we are also we support different organizations as well. One example is the Internet Engineering Task Force. So if you saw the middle layer that Pablo demonstrated showed in his slide earlier, the Internet Engineering Task Force is the premier standards development organization. This is not what you would maybe envision as a standards organization if you think about the ITU, for example, because everyone in the IETF is basically a volunteer. Some of them represent organizations, but they go there to anyone can propose a standard. We can talk about how the IETF is structured or governed later on. But that's one of the organizations that the Internet Society supports. More than that, the Internet Society is really a community. So it's a membership-based community. Their staff, so that includes myself, but the staff makes up like 0.1% of the Internet Society. There's a global community of members. Anyone can sign up. Anyone can be a member. These members also mobilize themselves according to the issues that they care about. So there's an accessibility standing. What is it? not a committee. Special interest group at stake. There's one on accessibility. There's one on online safety. There's one on connectivity and rural issues. Another, I think, worth highlighting component of the Internet Society is the chapters. So the chapters are they're also they're experts and volunteers. They give their time and their resources to organize amazing events like this. So this event was made possible through Internet Society chapters who did the work on the ground, thought about and they've been doing this for years. So a lot of the impact that we have on the ground, especially, are because of that big community that we have. These chapters also work together, as we've seen for inSIG. But I think what's most important for us to remember is, we have these amazing chapters, amazing leaders who give their time, give a lot of their expertise, and this is not because of money. They're not doing it for money. And you will see this when you get into the internet governance space, when you get into even the work of the technical community. Yes, there are people who are paid, like myself and Pablo and Samiran, but then most of the people who are involved in this work, they do it because they believe that, not just in the technology, but they believe that because the internet that enables everything that we use the internet for is really worth nurturing. And that is what this event is all about, is nurturing the next generation of internet leaders.
So thank you. So chapters are a very important constituents of Internet Society. You can choose to become a global member, and you can also choose to become a member of the chapter as well. So if you don't want to become a member of a chapter, it is fine. At least become a member of the global community of Internet Society. And if you choose to become a member of the chapter, then the chapter has their own set of procedures, rules, and activities and events, and you can be associated with that. So that's a good area of engagement therein. Now, I'll come to Pablo once again. Pablo, what are the areas of engagement? So we in the room have 50 plus new people who are trying to get onto internet governance. In IPNIC, what are the areas where they can engage themselves?
First of all, if you have any interest in network operations, either you are part of the internet service providers ecosphere, IPNIC is for you. So we have around 20,000 networks, autonomous system networks that we serve as members. So we're a member-based organization. And we have 2 conferences every year. In those conferences, the community meets to develop policies. Those policies determine how IPNIC allocates IP addresses to those networks, those members that I'm telling you. And a part of that, we have a lot of capacity building in terms of helping network engineers with their network architecture, configuration, IP addresses. Very importantly, deploying IPv6. IPv6 is the protocol that comes next to IPv4. IPv4 is a very small address space that has emptied, and there are no more addresses left, just a tiny bit. But the new thing to move towards is IPv6, and we help a lot the networks to do that. So if an inclination to work on network operations, network connectivity, IPNIC is the place to go. and it's an open and welcoming community, very diverse. And please contact me because we have fellowship program to support next generation of network operators. And we also would like to diversify a bit in terms of the technical community, only to the technical people, is not properly multi-stakeholder until you are able to receive the perspective of, for example, policymakers or the commercial side of these operations. So we also welcome that, and we have content in our conferences, particularly focused for those communities. If you are curious about how the internet works, EPINIC also can be a place to do. And if you're looking for career opportunities in this sector of network operations, please contact and feel welcome to the EPINIC community.
Thank you, Pablo, for specifying what are the areas of engagement. So I'll put the same question to you, Samaran, that if this 70 new people faces want to engage themselves with ICANN, from where they should ideally start, because it's such a big ocean of different communities, different interest groups. How should they try to engage themselves with ICANN?
So I'll give you the ICANN part of the answer, and I'll give you my personal answer as well. So let's start with the personal answer first. I think Internet Society chapters is a great place to start because you get a wide variety of people who come in. It's a very structured process. There are, these chapters which exist. It's a unique system of chapters that already exist, at least in India, and we are here. And then, once you're in that system, you can look at all the resources that ICANN has. So ICANN, has several resources available. The first thing you can do is, of course, get on the ICANN, website, go check it out, and sign up for one of the mailing lists so you can stay informed. But eventually, you should be looking at either a fellowship or a next-gen opportunity. So again, all of this is available on the website, and then you can look at the application requirements and apply. And actually, taking a ICANN Learn course, one of the courses is mandatory to apply for the fellowship. So these courses are free of charge, obviously. It's on the ICANN Learn website, and these courses are very focused on ICANN's activities. Now, let me also add over here that the way ICANN is organized is in the grand scheme of things, there are advisory committees and supporting organizations. So these supporting organizations are those which help make policy, and the advisory committees are those which look at those policies and give advice on them. Eventually, and in fact, we have a sitting ICANN board member on my right and one in front of me. He's about to join the board. It goes to the board. And then, it is taken up by the board in their day-to-day work, and eventually a policy is decided on. So the reason I'm giving you this little background is you too can get on, if there is an interest you have in, let's say, the root server system, then there is this RSAC caucus, one can join, or the mailing list, or the best place to start for anybody is, at large, which is really open to everybody, anywhere, and just get an idea of what the main large issues are that is being debated at ICANN. And at large is then split into regional, organizations. We have various people in the room. I'm looking at names and seats over here, who are part of that ecosystem. And I'm sure you can talk to the organizers of this event, and you'll find many at-large members, and they can guide you further.
Thank you, Simran. I think that's a very specific way to guide the new people how to join the ICANN ecosystem. So we do have someone from at large who has grown. So Satish, would you like to state briefly about the at large structure where these people can join?
Hi, I'm Satish, and I'm part of the ICANN at large. So the ICANN at large is the end user's home in ICANN. There are actually a couple of places where any of our end users, and all of us are end users, can participate. And one such place is the at large. The other is the NCSG, which is the non-commercial stakeholder group, where there is also option, but that is largely meant for registrants. Now, what's the difference between an end user and a registrant? A registrant is someone who has registered a domain name in his or her name, whereas an end user is someone just who's using the internet. Now, we also have a place in ICANN, and that is this ICANN at large. So the way that large is structured is there are 5 regions across the world, and we are part of the Asia Pacific region. And there is something called the Asia Pacific Regional at Large Organization, where members of at large, there are 2 kinds of members. One is organizational members, called at large structures. The other is the individual members. And you can be either one. If you're not part of an existing ALS, like for example, take ISOC Bangalore. If you are a member of ISOC Bangalore, then you're already a member of at large through that ISOC Bangalore. But if you're not a part of any at large structure, you can directly be involved as an individual member. And currently the APRLO chair is Amrita. Who is Amrita? She's a summit. So Amrita is the current chair. I was the previous chair. So this is an open place, and you can walk in actually. Whether you take membership or not, you can still participate. And participation means participating in working groups and calls. So if you want more details, we'll cover maybe some other time. But the point is that you have the option to today to walk into at large and start participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Satish, for talking about at large. At this point in time, I will just open the floor for questions to the esteemed speakers. Any questions you might have, you are ready to shoot them at the speakers.
Any questions?
Yeah, we have one here. Can you introduce yourself and then ask the question?
My name is Prakash Gupta, and my question is on the the last slide that was shown by Pablo in the the reverse of the all the channel from the the community at the top. Now, one thing that I understood, one is the participation in working group, but how ICANN and the community interact with each other, and sort of have layers of communication and the accountability, sort of like what is happening in the internet exactly, and what's the power of the community at this end, like, and how it manifests.
Good question. So I think you can talk about that empowered community.
Sure. So it's a very good question you have, and essentially every step of the way, I mean, let me take a little longer view, and then we'll get into some details. So every step of the way, there's a process to ensure that whether who's being selected into a community, etc., goes through a proper process. So it's just not anybody can show up. I mean, you can sign up for mailing lists and stuff, but so who is actually in the room gets vetted by the community. So it's very important for community members to get to know each other. And this is where, when I said in my previous answer that where do you start, Internet Society chapters is a great place to start, because you will already meet members of community. So that is one, guiding principle in a sense, okay? Because eventually a lot of these, who's the next person who's going to get a seat is decided by the community. ICANN's role, like ICANN staff's role, is to be your secretariat, okay? Noel, for her organization, she is secretariat. Pablo, acts in the same role, as do I. So we are answerable. Our CEO also sits on the board of ICANN, and essentially we are responsible to our CEO, and the CEO is responsible to the board. So there are guidances that we have on how we engage. And then, of course, there's the concept of the empowered community, which actually guides a lot of these conversations. And the multi-stakeholder model looks very just and fair, and it is meant to, and that's the whole idea. But in that process, you could take years to make a decision. And that, I'm just giving you a 360-degree view of what this is all about. In the process of being fair, equitable, and just, and you need to listen to everybody who's shown up for that conversation. And if they have good points to make, you need to take everything into account, and therefore it takes a long time. I'll leave you with one example, if I may. Yes. Thank you. When GDPR got enacted, it took us and the community slightly by surprise, in that we knew something was going to happen, but we didn't know to what impact it would have on internet governance. And the core impact, there could be various things one can discuss, but the main impact was the whois information that people used to figure out who had a website, who was the owner or at least subscriber of a website. That information got redacted because registries and registrars could no longer could guarantee if somebody like Martin is from Europe, but he could be sitting in Sri Lanka. So, or India. Okay. I was trying to put you on vacation. So you're here on work, right? So, and if his data is breached, the fines were so punitive that, one would go out of business. So they just decided to redact everything. Now, it has taken us about 7 years, Martin, correct me if I'm wrong, to get to kind of an alternative. Martin is gesturing, so I added kind of alternative, which is called the RDRS, where ICANN is trying to be the funnel through which a request for information by law enforcement agencies or by researchers can be sent to registries and registrars to act on and provide some personal information, right? So this process, unfortunately, has taken a long time coming. Okay, so I'm just giving, I know I've kind of gone a little beyond your scope of your question, but I thought it's important for you to know how this works.
I have a specific question. Hi, my name is Shivakumar Dakshinamurthy. So I'm a security plus AI governance guy. I'm researcher in AI security governance.
Scared already.
So my specific question is, these days, lot of information is being collected in terms of gaming industry or you name it, anything, right? When it comes to specifically on the privacy side of it, is it when it comparatively, right, even IG side, is there any cooperation being done at that, protecting the privacy of the people? Or is there any multi-stakeholder you talked about? That's a good, I think, lot of good information, something new to me. Actually, I learned this. So I wanted to keen to know that, is there something specifically done on the privacy side of it? Anything is happening?
Good question. So the European Union is a collection of 32 nations. They have a set of 32 nations, right? Yeah. they've come up with their set of regulations. Now, India is working on something. China has something. Japan probably has something. The United States, state of California has something. Now, lot of geographies, lot of economies are looking at privacy because just given the way technology has emerged, because it's digital, a lot of information gets collected, even if it's not meant to be collected. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So I'll hand over to Martin, but just to finish what I was saying, so when we look at all of this from ICANN's perspective, what are we looking at? I can answer to that extent, and then I'll let Martin add to it. From ICANN's perspective, what we look at is, does it impact ICANN's work? In connecting names and numbers. So I'll give you a quick example and then I'll hand over to Martin. So when the, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of India was being debated, there have been 4 iterations. In iteration number 2, there was a section that when we read it, we found it to impact our registrars. Okay, and we actually did a study of it. I did a study and I recommended to our larger team that we need to let the government of India know this is an unintended consequence. This is not intended, and it actually was removed in the next. So that's how we engage. We have a government engagement team that actually looks at all policies coming up related to privacy and other things, even where just to make sure that this one open internet at the technical layer continues. Martin?
Some level of deliberation already is being done. That means collaboration already happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit of background also on the European regulation. European regulation is seen as a kind of golden standard for the world, right? You've heard that. And what does that mean? Basically, one thing is that if you want to trade and you have anything to do with personal data, you need to have an agreement either as a company or if you're from an economy that has been recognized as sufficiently be protecting the data. That's one thing. That if we take that to ICANN, I was in the offices when we first talked with the European Commission and the European Data Protection Supervisor in Brussels. So what does it mean? Can you give us any guidance? They couldn't. This guidance issue is an issue not only for ICANN, but for many more industry, for even the police force. Even Europol has its debates with the European Data Protection Supervisor on which data can we be safe, can we use, can we draw upon. And cases like that is really finding in the keyword of what is proportional. It was deemed that who is, as such, was not proportional. All information about everybody, always available to everybody. That principle seems to be non-proportional. So the RDRS was a different development that was already going. Before that time, who is was everything. And RDRS was like being more targeted, selected information. And that technical development was already started before GDPR. Now, when GDPR became active, we had to take who is down to protect ICANN and the registrars and the registries, the contracted parties, from being sued all the time for non-proportional dealing with the data. And we have kept up the obligation for the contracted parties to keep the data available, to have the data available in case that somebody would ask for it, that has a justified request. And in those cases, the information is released. Now, one of the challenges is that there's not a global understanding of what is a justifiable request. Even with police forces, which is the easiest point, it's like if a police force from a very unknown country in the international community asks a question, do we know it's a genuine request or not? And for police forces, there's all kind of making sure that we know it. Other users like IP lawyers that are interested in those data, or just people who get interested in who's behind that website, have a bigger problem. Now, police really doesn't have a problem because I know the complaints when Whois was just taken down. For instance, somebody at Europol came into me in a conference and said, "How could you have done that? Because now we can't catch the bad guys that quickly anymore or stop those websites." We talked about it. 2 minutes later, he was on a panel and he was saying how they were catching perpetrators on the dark web. I looked at him and he smiled. So the data are kept, and access to the data is the problem. How do we ensure that the access is to the right people? And that is what we're still working on. And this is why we now have a pilot to see how we can make that work best. I hope that helps on the question.
Yeah, that helps. And RDRS is still, Martin, a voluntary initiative. It is not a mandate.
At this moment, the pilot is a voluntary initiative. Most of the domain names are covered, are included by the people who take part, but not all.
Okay. Thank you. So at this point in time, being a membership-driven organization, Noel, what is Internet Society's take on privacy?
All right. So the Internet Society has a privacy policy in place. So if you're giving your data as a member to us, we do have certain disclosures. And what I would like to believe is a robust privacy policy. But in terms of what we do, so we are also an advocacy organization. We approach privacy in two ways. So first is we believe that a lot of the issues that we encounter now when it comes to the use of the internet, including issues with our data and the privacy of what we do online, there's a lot that we could do as users. So we try to provide capacity building to users, to members, on how they can protect their data. So we have an online course on privacy and data protection and digital identity, I believe. But the other aspect is when it comes to policy making, so public policy making. We provide input to the fora that develop privacy frameworks, whether it's at the national or at the regional or at the global level. So in Asia Pacific, one example that I can think about is the APEC privacy framework, for example. Another expanding area of our work for us is disappointingly in a lot of policy debates, privacy and security are being pitted against each other, as if they're directly oppositional. But in reality, what makes the internet insecure actually also makes your data and your activities less private. In India, one example that we really pushed back against is the traceability provision in the revised intermediary liability rules. An example, this is a good example of how security and privacy really go together, is because the proposal is to be able to trace the source or the origin of a message, and to be able to do that, the ways that, well, basically, policymakers like to say, you technical guys figure it out. But really, the technical guys are saying that there's no way to do this without violating people's privacy, without having to basically break encryption and having to trace having to go through kind of how to say, the path of the message, which would mean um, identifying people and reading through messages that may not have anything to do with the source. Yeah, so I think this is something that you will encounter a lot if you work in I don't know, security, safety issues, for example. But if you're looking for resources to be able to push back on those proposals, then just go to the Internet Society and you will find quite a few discussing it in trying to relate it to the technical design of the internet and why it's important for privacy.
Thank you. I'll go to Pablo once again, but before that, any more questions from the room? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anita Walker, and my question is for Noel. It's very commendable that the Internet Society stands for, wants to be a force for good. But I'm curious to know how are you addressing the forces for bad or evil in the world, apart from like working with the government cybercrime departments? Apart from it, what else are you doing in a practical manner?
So forces for bad. I okay. That's going to be that's a lot. That's a very broad. Yeah, it's becoming a very broad topic. Okay. First, let me also emphasize that despite the internet having a broad mission, I think Pablo also wants to say something. Is Pablo raising his hand?
I'm just so sorry. I just need to say goodbye. I need to leave, but it's an honor and thank you very much. I'll remain in touch, okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Pablo, for being awake so late. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. So, despite being a membership-based organization, we are at the end of the day a small organization. A lot of the Internet Society's mission is still grounded on the preservation of the technical infrastructure of the internet. That means that a lot of the issues that we work in are issues that would fundamentally affect the infrastructure and the way the infrastructure works and the way it operates. A lot of the issues that we see now on the internet is not so much with how the technical infrastructure is built, but how people are using it. So to the extent that, and this is not, I should emphasize that this is not for the sake of preserving the technology, because we feel that by preserving the design of the internet and the technical infrastructure of the internet, we enable the internet, we help enable for the internet to be used more broadly. As technology and any tool always has two sides, right? Like a knife, you can use, knife is very useful, but then you can use it for other things as well. That said, so at the and a lot of this is happening in the policy and the user space. We provide a technically grounded input to policy to make sure that the policies that are put in place are very much in scope, or they're necessary and proportionate and fit for purpose. When it comes to building user capacity, there's a lot of we do a lot of work in empowering users to be able to there's many names these days. Digital resilience, to build digital resilience, to build to build awareness and how users can protect themselves, because there's only so much you can do or anyone can do to prevent people who are who have bad intentions from using things that they could use. Bad people will always find something to use if they want to do something bad. So as individual users, there's a lot that we could do. For example, in trying to how to say, we are first trying to teach or supporting organizations that teach users how to protect themselves online. And second, we are when we provide input to policy, we are very much we very much advocate for, rather than having restrictions on everything, um, having tools, for example, having tools available to users to be able to uh, to report or to curate what they see online themselves. So there's now an increasing number of tools for that. So it's really we're very conscious about yes, minimizing harm, but also making sure that you do not impair the good things that the internet brings when you try to minimize harm.
Thank you. I think that's a good answer to what the question was. It was a very broad question. I think you summed it up very well. We have another question from the room.
Last question, right?
No, we do have. Okay. There is no one online. Yes. Please
Hello.
state your name and then ask the question.
Yeah. My name is Carl. I'm from Malaysia. So I have a question regarding what Noel just said just now about when there's like effort to trace back the message, for example, but it will cost the right of the user, right? So my question is, how do each organization or authoritative body leveraging or basically dissect the dichotomy of internet governance when you are trying to leverage between the importance of rights of the people and also the collective benefits of the community. For example, when it comes to that specific example, when you said about the you have to break the right of people in order for you to trace that, right? I mean, sure, there will be like opportunity costs on that, but if that's the only way for you to reduce the risk of people getting scammed, then I think that is one of the ways for you to do it. So my question is, how do you leverage between these two factors when it comes to internet governance? Thank you.
That's a very long question. Okay. Do we have any other question in the room? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Swati. So we spoke about data privacy for infrastructure. So if we look at, I'm just expanding the scope a bit, not just India, but if we're looking at ASEAN, for instance, the data centers are mostly in Singapore. So at least for ASEAN countries. So there is a fear that data will be intercepted through subsea cables. So how is that bit addressed in this whole internet ecosystem? I know it's a little expanded, but that's a genuine fear that people have, and that's where the whole data sovereignty and even digital sovereignty comes in, right? Because the data is leaving the country to be stored outside.
So yeah, there is a little nuanced thing here. If you are afraid of the fact that data under the subsea cable, undersea cable will be intercepted, are you also afraid that the data, when it is transmitting over Wi-Fi, it is also getting intercepted? It is. Right. So broadly, it is the same thing. If the security measures which you apply for a normal day-to-day scenario, there are much more stringent security measures which are there for the subsea cables. The only fastest way anybody can reach to those subsea cables are the sharks. Okay. So it is pretty much, if you want to do it, you can do it. Okay, but that's not a normal scenario where we are still putting our heads on in terms of getting intercepted through the subsea cables. Okay. So we'll come back to you. I have some answers. Okay.
But I think gentleman up there was first. He's just wondering what happened to his question.
Right. It was a long question, so I gave a little long pause for her to
get ready.
to get ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
But you have just 1 minute, okay, to respond back.
Okay, so definitely, I think internet the existing fora for internet governance can be leveraged more. It needs to be strengthened more. For example, in Asia Pacific and even locally, it could use with more government participation. So we don't see a lot of government participation in internet governance fora. Governments like to go to multilateral fora where they are guaranteed that they have some authority and they have a vote. In terms of, I would challenge you to also think about when it comes to issues that that are sort of harmful, emerging from internet use. Often the internet infrastructure is targeted because it's easy. It's the easy target. So instead of, for example, I'm law enforcement. I already receive a lot of data. I do not even have capacity to sift through all the data that I receive. But instead of building my capacity, I say, let's just block that. It's easy. The ISP could just block that. But am I doing my job properly? Something to be said about that. So also when we hear these narratives about the internet is bad, let's shut that down, let's filter this, let's do that. We should also think about what these authorities are capable of doing with the authority that they already have. Because from experience, at least in the technical community, the measures that are targeted at the infrastructure, they don't solve the problem because these are social problems. You don't solve social problems with technology, or at least there's always a limit to which you can solve social problems with technology. I think we all know that.
Well, I think I'll stop you here. Okay. So, Samran, a minute for you to respond to the question.
Can I plea bargain and get 90 seconds?
Please.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll actually answer his question very quickly, and then I'll come to you, ma'am. So very quickly, right in the beginning of this session, one of the things that said, maybe you had picked up on it, maybe you didn't, is that, this is an existential challenge, internet governance, okay? And we are faced with challenges all the time. And part of the problem is, while there is the content which is on top, trying to block, trying to do taking some measures to control what is going on over there, you may unintentionally impair the network that Noel has been describing. Okay, so this is what internet governance is also about, where you need to be working with stakeholders to figure out what is the right balance. Okay, so we can continue this conversation, but sir has given me 90 seconds, so I will move on to your point. So I've been in this conversation about data security for the last decade and more than a decade. 10 years ago, the question was, our data is going out of the country, and what's going on? Like, how do we protect it? Today, you may or may not be aware, India is one of the largest data centers, country with the largest number of data centers, okay? This happened because around 2016, 2017, one of those years, the government actually gave every state 1,000 crores to build data centers, okay? And the private sector has come on and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, the internet you use, the effectiveness of the internet is how much data is available literally at the edge of the network so that it's served quickly. That's why you can watch your online films so easily. A lot of our
90
data
seconds.
is actually in the country, and the rest of it I'll tell you when we meet for coffee.
Thank you. So, thank you, Samaran. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Pablo, who has vanished. And we had a lovely session on the internet governance ecosystem. You explained about ICANN. We learned about internet society, ways of engagement with APNIC, ways of engagement with internet society chapters, with ICANN as well. So thank you for sharing your insights, Samiran and Noel and Pablo. We will chat again on this topic further. Okay. Just a group photo with the speakers.